I specifically didn't answer your text for that reason.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Adonis Panegas. I am the Executive Director of Concilio. You are with us at Socially Connected. Today I have one of our assets of Concilio, our esteemed training coordinator, Leslie Jimenez. Welcome, Leslie.
Thank you. Hi, everybody watching us tonight. It's a pleasure to be here.
So Leslie, please share a little bit about what you do at Concilio and also share with us about what this amazing topic that we're going to talk about is. A little hard to go through. We're going to touch on some deep issues, but I think it's a very important conversation we're going to have.
Definitely. So if I can start real quick, I actually would like to provide sort of like a caution for anybody watching us tonight. While this is going to be a very general conversation and one that ideally provides a little bit of education and community resources, what we're talking about could potentially be triggering to some folks who might be tuning into us. This is an opportunity where I ask that you please consider having an emotional safety plan. So all that means is just whatever you need to do as you're watching us to stay mentally, spiritual, if that applies, emotionally well, please practice that. I just want to put that pad out there, so to speak. But my name is Leslie Jimenez, and I'm the training coordinator with Concilio. I'm going on being with Concilio a little over 4 years now. And I organize or directly train. And so I love the opportunity that I've had with Concilio. I've been able to work with so many families, supporting them just the same way they've also educated me. A lot of folks with lots of years of experiences and supporting children, whether in child welfare or not. And so it's been a beautiful opportunity. And so today, talking about child abuse awareness is incredibly important. And so to make sure that we're all on the sort of general same page, when we talk about child abuse, there's essentially 4 categories. So we're talking about physical abuse, emotional or psychological abuse, sexual abuse, and neglect. Okay, and so those are the 4 main categories of child abuse. And of course, if you're looking for more extensive information, I encourage you to join the trainings that Concilio offers, or even some of our partners when it comes to talking about child abuse. But essentially, in our parenting classes, we talk about it. I give classes to foster parents, so folks interested in becoming foster parents, and the maintenance hours once folks have become active foster parents. And so for those interested in, again, getting more knowledge, these are definitely some of the ways to get educated or have a better understanding or direct dialogue with someone regarding this very important topic, and especially when trying to be preventative for our children in our communities.
Thank you, Leslie. And as you mentioned, you oversee our parenting curriculum, which Concilio has done for many, many years, and throughout its lifespan has probably serviced thousands of parents. One of those topics in our curriculum is around discipline and healthy discipline. So can you share a little bit of information about where is that fine line between healthy discipline and now crossing over to child abuse potentially?
And I think some of our guest speakers tonight are definitely going to touch on that. There is a fine line, right? For some of this is cultural, right? For some folks, right, we've heard spare the rod, spoil the child kind of a thing. So there's this long history, and even previous generations or some of our ancestors that have thought, to be tough, right, physically speaking, is to provide proper education. And so while discipline actually has nothing to do with child abuse, but given our extensive history and how culturally many of our society has merged it, many times discipline is confused for physical abuse specifically. And I will say more recently, what I'm noticing bigger trends in my classes is many of us are also missing the aspect of psychological abuse when it comes to discipline, right? Because some parents say, well, I never hit my kid, right? I've never done any of those atrocious stories you hear in the news. but you don't have to physically lay hands on someone to essentially discipline in unhealthy patterns. So discipline has these very key components, right, of the mental, emotional, but also the physical. And so again, just understanding that discipline is actually to teach and guide. One more time, to teach and guide. And so if we consider what that practically means as parents, you're teaching at all moments. When I'm teaching you how to tie your shoelaces, how to get dressed, or what is a proper young man or a young woman, you're brushing your teeth, you're disciplining, right? And we often don't think of discipline in that way. We think of just, wearing my big girl pants and my big boy pants and rah, 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 rah. It's nothing to do with that. But unfortunately, over time, and even still today, there's a lot of erroneous mixtures when it comes to abuse and discipline.
So in your experience, because our title of our program is still parenting, right? And that's something we should probably change, because when somebody hears that, they feel as though they're not a good parent, or they're being reprimanded because now I have to take a class. But it's so much more than that, right? Can you talk a little bit about that?
It is. So most times, most folks are not happy to be in my class. And some very brave souls will say, I'm not happy at all about having to be at this place. And what are you going to teach me? And I've raised 15 million babies, so I can't learn anything else. Right. And the reality is, we all have to have some level of humility, all of us. And it doesn't matter what age we are. There's always something that we can learn, or something we can be reminded of. Some topics are very general, but sometimes we need to be reminded, hey, don't forget to tell your child, hey, I love you. And not because you did anything, I just love you because I love you. You exist, and I feel so blessed that you're in this world, for example. And so, yes, sometimes it does strike the ego, and I always allow my parents to share their feelings when it comes to that, because it's good to know sort of what we're walking into the room with, but it is beyond that. And I will tell you, as a parent myself, I am a parent to a beautiful little 8-year-old. I tell you, for me, I've been very blessed to have these classes. And at this point, I've taught them time and time and time again. I can probably repeat them in my sleep, but they have genuinely kept me accountable. And nothing that we talk about in our classes, I don't live out myself. So everything that I'm teaching, I'm practicing. And I will tell you, for me, I've had the blessing early on, and I'm seeing the benefits in my relationship with my daughter. And so it has nothing to do with being good parent, bad parent. There's no such a thing. We're humans. We make mistakes. We all need accountability, and we all have room to learn something new.
And traditionally, we've held our parenting classes in person for many years, but because of COVID, we went to virtual. And as you can feel the energy from Leslie, she is a very vibrant trainer. If you are interested in being a part of one of her future classes, feel free to look it up at our website at elconcilio.net, or call our number at 215-627-3100. We will be sharing Leslie's email at the end. We have several classes already scheduled throughout the year, so it's online right now. You could be at home having your cup of coffee while you participate in some of the classes that we have available. So take advantage of this free class and this free service that she does. Leslie, again, is an amazing facilitator, and she engages with you at a different level. So we're just happy to get this conversation started. We have two great guests joining us, and I'll let Leslie introduce our first guest.
Thank you, Adonis. So our first guest today is going to be Miss Judy Wright, and she is with Northeast Treatment Centers, also known as NET. And she's been with NET since 1998 in a variety of positions, such as Director of Behavioral Health, Director of Foster Care, and Individual Residential Treatment for Pennsylvania and Delaware. She is now operating as the foster care trainer. She has experience thus far for 30 years, or over 30 years, working with children and families. She is married with 3 adult children, 1 grandson and 1 grandpup. Okay, puppy had to get up in there. And so we are grateful that she's here with us tonight, and hopefully she's going to share her wonderful wisdom and experiences, and you'll have a good time tonight with Miss Wright.
Thank you for joining us, Judith. How are you?
I am doing marvelous, and I'm glad Leslie said wisdom. You see that gray? Yeah. Indication of the wisdom. I am very, very honored that I have been asked to come here today. So I'm interested in speaking with you and seeing what information that we can share. And yes, Leslie's right. It is a challenging topic. We talk about it at Northeast Treatment Centers quite a bit. And It could be uncomfortable from time to time, but I think it's something that is certainly required and necessary.
Absolutely. And Judy, let's just hop right into it, right? You know, Adonis asked me a little bit about the cultural piece. What would your take be on that? How do you find that culture plays into child abuse, whether it's in the awareness and understanding and potentially prevention?
So here's the thing, right? So I always like to use myself as a sort of baseline. My mother and my grandmother was Dominican. So we come from a very interesting blend. And my father, who was actually very formally educated, he had a degree in psychology. My mother and my dad had a really different way of raising and parenting. So it helps me when I'm working with foster parents and even the case managers to talk about how culture impacts how we see things as professionals, right? So all of our stuff impacts how we process, how we see things, how are we going to work with other people. And so one of the things that I like to share often is we have to come with compassion. That is critical, right? So we could look at regulations, we can look at the law, we can talk about all of that stuff, and we know that's going to be important. However, there's a way that we need to engage with families, with foster families, with the staff, for them to begin to really kind of understand what they're looking at, not knee jerking, which is something that a lot of times we can do, right? And we can jump straight to the law without trying to get a better understanding of what's happening within this family. How has this family, how have they seen parenting? How have they parented? Have they been parented, right? So that's the thing. So a lot of times people historically will raise children according to how they were raised. And like Leslie mentioned, and like, so this is not a secret. One of the things that my husband shares publicly is that he was born in 1951. And so one of the things about him is his grandmother abused him terribly. I'm not going to get into the graphics about it, but one of the things that she used to do was beat him in his sleep. So when we think about the kind of trauma that people have, we can't dismiss the generational culture. Like Leslie said, spare the rod, spoil the child. That's what they say, right? Not necessarily right on point with that, but that's the idea. And so back then, 50s and the 60s and 70s, the same wonderful grandparents and the same wonderful people who are parenting our foster kids now have had that experience. That was their experience. Yeah. Sit, be quiet, speak when you're spoken to, and anything out of that would move into potentially, like Leslie said, a physical discipline, which essentially did not border, unfortunately, on abuse, but was abuse, but not defined that way back then. So now when we're working with our older adults who do such a wonderful job raising a lot of our foster kids, and we certainly need them, not just at Northeast Treatment Centers, but at Concilio as well. So we need those older people to come in and help our kids. But at the same time, we need to also understand where they came from, what their experience has been. And one of the things that I always love to say is that behavior is learned, therefore it can be taught. So even with our wonderful parents, we have to sometimes reteach, reframe how you are going to continue to be great parents, but be able to do it in a way that's slightly different by using maybe collaborative problem solving, by using behavior management and modification, and maybe not being so punitive when we're discussing it, right? So we have to remove our judgment, because that's something that we often have. We always have our own prejudices, our own discrimination, our own judgment about what we think related to particular families, related to culture. And, you know, one of the things that I do know on my Dominican side is that, and the Haitian side as well, is that they yell a lot and they speak loudly, right? So they communicate, and the communication is, with the Haitian, it's aggressive, you know, but we have to understand that before we start judging, oh, you really shouldn't be talking to that child that way. We really have to get an understanding. And the best way to do that is through communication and engagement.
And you're absolutely right. There is so many times when I've been in trainings and parents have said things like, "Where were you when I was 5?" Right? Or, "Oh my God, there was so much damage that I did as a parent, I didn't even know." So definitely
Yes.
like cultural shock, even in the concepts that for some now is sort of normal or things that we're trying to reteach. So, and you know, as we move into the next question, so how would you say specifically, Net, or your role is supporting families in understanding child abuse awareness and prevention?
Well, of course, everybody has to take the Act 31. So that's basically the foundation of understanding the law. And then we want to make it very practical. So we try to integrate understanding child abuse, what the law is, but also the expectations through effective parenting. So like Adonis said, like you can't sort of almost speak about child abuse without talking about effective parenting and how to do that. So at Northeast Treatment Centers, what we attempt to do as often as we can is that we work with the case managers. So as they're doing their weekly, monthly, bi-weekly meetings with the family going into the home, they're trying to find ways that they can consistently integrate how they can support and help the families understand the expectations, also about what to look out for. So you were talking about the 4 different components. And one of the things I think gets missed a lot, people looking at the physical piece, but they miss that emotional, that psychological piece in terms of not at Northeast Treatment, but another place that I was working with. I will tell you that someone put a parent put up a report card on the refrigerator. She didn't mean to be malicious about it, but the child had failed all of their classes, and she felt that putting up and embarrassing this child would be a way for him to feel like, okay, I need to do better because everybody else in the house is getting better grades. But again, and not knee jerking, not saying, okay, you absolutely can't be a foster parent. You absolutely, because of course we weren't talking about anything that was immediate danger, but we were able to talk to her. She was able to see her error in terms of how do we support our kids? How do we embrace them? How do we discipline without embarrassment, ridicule, and all of that other stuff? And I want everybody to know that the emotional piece can be really detrimental from coming and being an African-American woman. We have to be careful, even within our own race, about not shaming people because they're darker skin, because their hair has a different texture, maybe because they're overweight. It could be anything. And so we have to integrate as often as possible those open discussions, transparency, right? And letting everyone know, our community, in terms of Northeast Treatment Centers and all the many places that they operate, and with their CUAs and with their foster care agencies, making sure that people in the community understand that we are an inclusive agency, that we accept everyone, that we need to work within the confines of the home and making sure that kids feel safe and that they feel loved. And if we find that parents need more education, then we need to do that. But it has to be an ongoing engagement. It just can't be something that comes up once a month, once a year for training. It has to be integrated every time there are home visits.
And generations have definitely changed, and how we view child abuse has changed. You've mentioned it a few times regarding how our parents or grandparents disciplined their children. But it's all cyclical, right? There's a term called breaking the cycle, especially around parenting. So individuals may not have known that they were being abused as a child and are now doing those same behaviors to their children and not considering it child abuse. So what advice or what suggestions would you give our audience here about how do we then break that cycle regarding how we bring up our children?
That's a tough one because they have to be around the information, right? So they have to be willing, number one, to accept that they have a challenge. I can tell you personally, we offer parenting classes and we offer parenting training in our church and in our community, right? And so people are like, no, because they don't want to be exposed because of the embarrassment, because oftentimes they know I'm probably not doing this the right way because no one ever taught me. And so I'm going to stick with the same consistent message. I don't think that we can do this without being providing the education, providing the resources. And I think Concilio, the fact that you guys work with such a large Hispanic population and a lot of your staff is Hispanic, that is, to go to a place to see people that look like you and can speak the same language you speak, speaks volumes. And so I know at Northeast Treatment Centers, we also do the same thing, and they have a nice diversified staff. But I don't think it'll be any different. My response wouldn't be any different. I think education, resources, hammering that in with compassion, non-judgmental, with love and patience. But when it doesn't work out, guess what? We got to make that hard decision about kids not safe anymore. And so we've got to do what we got to do legally to protect and make sure our kids are safe.
Well, Judith, thank you so much for your time. It does pass by really quickly. You provided an excellent array of information. We are great partners with the net, and we continue to work with you and look forward to other collaborations. So thank you for being here today. And you see her information there. Please feel free to reach out to Judith. Thank you, Judith.
Thank you.
You guys have a great day. Bye-bye.
So Leslie, you see how quickly the time goes by? We are getting real in the midst of this conversation because there's so much to talk about. This is really just bringing a flashlight to this bigger conversation so that hopefully people can engage in these conversations at home or later on down the line, because if we're not talking about it, then we're not making it aware that it exists. And far too long, people avoid it. And what you brought up about the Act 31, and that's being a mandated reporter, right? And if you see something, you have to say something. I strongly feel like if you're seeing something and don't say anything, you're just as bad as the person who's doing it. So you really have to take that into account as we move forward. So as we transition on to our next guest, we have actually a small clip that we want to show from our partners at PCA that we'll put up right now.
Philadelphia Children's Alliance has been promoting healing and justice for sexually abused children for over 3 decades. We believe that it occurs within the context of chronic neglect, poverty, and a number of other social factors.
1 in 10 kids is sexually abused before their 18th birthday.
Last year in Philadelphia, there were 3,363 reports of child sex abuse.
Given that 60% of children don't disclose their abuse, the majority are not getting the help that they need.
Child sexual abuse thrives when good people decide it's none of their business.
So PCA and our neighborhood partners in prevention are making it our business to do something about it.
Together, we're working to strengthen families and reduce the social inequities that place children and families at risk to begin with.
Strong families need supportive communities.
It takes a village.
Let's make it our business, Philly.
Let's end 1 in 10.
Thank you. What a great piece. At this moment, I'd like to introduce Paul DeLorenzo. He's the interim executive director at PCA. Paul's been in the game for over 4 decades, working to enhance community services, particularly around child protection, family support, and just overall prevention services. Paul, PCA does an amazing job in the community, and you've been there now for a little over the year in this role. So I want to thank you for joining us tonight. And Concilio and PCA are right across the street from each other, so we have a lot of synergy and opportunities to work together. And just wanted to welcome you, Paul, and thank you for being on the show.
Well, thank you for having me. I noticed that good-looking guy from Concilio in our video, and thanks for being our neighbor and our partner. Yeah, you're right. I have been blessed. I've had a 4-decade career in child welfare and youth development settings, and about 30 years ago, I was part of a group of 5 or 6 people who founded the Philadelphia Children's Alliance, which is at 300 East Hunting Park Avenue. At that time, it was just a small center. It wasn't on Hunting Park Avenue. We were at 40th and Chestnut. And it came together because kids who were getting reported for child sexual abuse, as you can imagine, I can't imagine anything more traumatizing for a child, right? To report that or to have that come to light. And then they would be interviewed by multiple people, the police, the Department of Human Services, maybe a therapist, this person, that person, the hospital where children would have forensic interviews. And so as a group, we decided we really need to do something so that we can reduce that level of trauma for kids, and that when they disclose and they tell their story, there's a way for us to make sure that healing and hope starts right away, and that they don't have to go through that multiple series of interviews with people. And so we looked around the country to see what else people were doing. And we found a model in Alabama, Huntsville, Alabama, where there was what they called a Child Advocacy Center. And they had developed a model where all of the professionals came together to do those interviews with kids. We said, hey, we can do that. We're Philadelphia. We can take on anything. And so we did. And since that time, we have served close to 40,000 kids. We see on average about 3,000 kids a year. After my time as one of the founders, I was, working at an agency here in Philly, and then my career, I went to work in state government for a while, and I worked in city government, and then I went to work for a national foundation, and so I traveled a lot for many years. And when I got ready to leave the foundation last year, the board of PCA contacted me and asked if I would come back and serve as an interim executive director. Our longtime ED, Chris Kirkner, who had been there for about 26 years, left, and they were really looking for somebody who could help them maybe kind of look forward. What's next for us as an organization? And then also to help them in the search process. Our board needed that kind of help. So I've taken that on, and listen, I am just there kind of doing a lot of cheerleading of a wonderful, wonderful team. I have great people. There's almost 50 of us who are part of the staff. We also are co-located in the building with the police department and Department of Human Services, as well as a medical clinic we have right in our building. So St. Chris and CHOP both participate as well. So you saw in that little video a little bit about the work that we do and all of those partners. Concilio is a partner of ours, and we have multiple partners. I think going back to the point that was made earlier when we started, this is a sensitive topic. It's very difficult for people to talk about. It touches a nerve, and it touches a nerve, quite frankly, because so many kids experience sexual violence, sexual assault, sexual abuse. And the ones who don't get help, don't get the assistance or support they need, they grow up with those scars, and emotionally that can be really damaging for them. Of course, to your point, Adonis, those cycles continue, right? And so when a parent who has had that trauma as a child gets into a position of parenting themselves, it's very difficult. It brings up a lot of issues from the past.
So, Paul, in this year of COVID, I've seen articles and things that, child abuse is down overall now. Now, that can't be the case, right? So can you share a little bit about how COVID has impacted maybe people reporting or just people being more aware that this is continually happening?
It's a great question. And, I talked to my friends and colleagues all over the country, and they're all experiencing the same thing, which was a significant drop in the numbers of child abuse reports. Doesn't mean that those were actually not happening. And the main reason for that, we believe, is that kids aren't out with other adults, right? They're isolated in a home. They're not at school. They're not at the rec center, the child care center. They're not in the pediatric clinics. They're just not out and about. And so the case numbers at DHS for a while took a deep dive. And I have to give the department credit. It really did a really proactive job of trying to go out and making sure that families knew the resource was there. We saw our numbers drop as well, and that was because the reports weren't getting made to other significant adults in the lives of these kids. But we never closed. We've continued to keep our doors open. We've done a lot of virtual work, but we do our interviews still in person. We don't have as many people in the building as we had before COVID, but things are getting better. We are starting to see more kids again. So it's kind of a good news, bad news story. Good news in that we're there as a resource for kids, and more kids are coming forward again, which is what we want.
And Paul, you're so right as far as like that while reports have gone down, we don't know the reality of real life home situations. And given the pandemic, there's been a lot of outrage and cry and concern, like in the media, about now everybody's in closed doors, right? And in closed spaces, and we're living in this sort of virtual world. And so what does that mean for families that are living in potentially toxic or abusive dynamics or situations, especially now that everybody is supposed to stay away from each other, right? We all kind of got the cooties. We don't want to be around each other, right? So it does make it like very difficult in that sense. Could you talk a little, you started talking a little bit about community resources. Anything in particular that you could share with folks? We did see that Ms. Rashida commented asking just what are any resources that potentially you may know of, or tips that you could give families or parents as they're getting to that frustrating point, but trying to prevent abuse? So how do we stop from parents getting to that abusive state or in that abusive behavior or action?
It's a great question, Leslie. And again, during this isolation, even families that have the most resources, right, they're still under stress. So families that were starting at a disadvantage, this has been really a significant challenge for them. I would say that there are a lot of community agencies out there, a lot of community-based agencies, yours, ours, to begin with, right? My phone number's at the bottom there. People know how to reach out to you. And there are a whole network of agencies all over the city. But oddly enough, and I really do mean this, I think the place to start when you're experiencing those kinds of challenges and difficulties is to call the Department of Human Services. And I say that because, most people think of DHS as the people that take their babies away. That's really only a very small part of what they do. DHS really operates, supports, funds, and does a lot of prevention work. They have a great deal of contracts and a great number of contracts with provider agencies all over the city. And their job is to work with families before they get to the doorstep of DHS, right? The Department of Human Services doesn't want to be involved in the lives of people. They want to help, they want to support, they want to make sure that they prevent that abuse. So I think you start by calling DHS. That's one place. The second thing is they can call agencies like Concilio, they can call Esperanza, they can call Congreso, they can call Catholic Social Services. I mean, there are just one agency after another out there. And those agencies can kind of make a determination. Is this a case that really needs to be called in? Is it really that serious? Or with some services and some supports, maybe the family doesn't really have to, get involved with the city agency at all. So I think that's one route. I think the other thing is that if kids are involved in school, if they have a doctor, schools, medical facilities, childcare centers, all of them now these days know the resources because we've developed a really good network of information. So people know how to make the connection. You just got to ask and be willing to, be brave enough to ask the questions.
So, Paul, my understanding is a lot of child abuse happens from people they know, right, from within the family. So, what has your experience been with? What is the aftermath with the family themselves, right, after this is revealed, and then what does that healing process looks like for them?
Yeah, well, it's spot on what you're saying. Most people think of child sexual abuse as being, some stranger who jumps out of a bush or, is hiding and assaults a child. And God knows that happens, but that's really not the majority of cases. The majority of kids are sexually assaulted by someone they know. And to your point, yes, a lot of times it could be a family member, could be a paramour, it could be a husband, it could be a wife, it could be anybody, right? Somebody that child knows, in part because the abuse occurs at the hands of someone who's trusted. So when a child comes to us, we do the interview of the child. We make sure they're okay medically. Law enforcement is involved because this is a crime as well. And then we have our own therapists, so we can work with families, do some family counseling. Or if we can't do the counseling, if we're too full, we have a network of agencies around the city that we can refer to. We have 16 partner agencies that we've helped to develop special counseling approaches for these kids and their families. But to your point, Adonis, this is a big problem because all these family loyalties come into play, right? The whole issue of, do I, rat out my uncle or my cousin or my boyfriend or, whoever it happens to be. And we do have cases, unfortunately, where parents sometimes take the side of the abuser and don't defend their child. And of course, then it becomes a much more serious situation.
Paul, I want to thank you for your time. We're wrapping up now, but you do have an upcoming event this weekend. Do you want to share?
We do. April 24th, a big cleanup. We're going to be at the SPIN headquarters up on Orthodox Avenue. I know your agency's involved, and there's a whole lot of others. It's a neighborhood cleanup and a resource fair. It's open to everyone. We're going to have a lot of giveaways, a lot of kind of fun surprises. We encourage people to come, tell your friends and neighbors, and bring them, and bring your kids.
Once again, thank you, Paul, for being here. And we're going to wrap up the show with a couple of our own updates. As Paul mentioned, Concilio will be present at their event this weekend. But our Victims Witness Services program is also doing an event this Saturday beginning at 10 a.m. at Edison's track field. We're doing a 5K run to acknowledge people who've been victimized of crimes, people we've worked with over the past year, and just to celebrate them, the fact that they've overcome this trauma in their lives and they've become resilient. So if you're interested in stopping by and supporting, we will be there at 10 a.m. at Edison Track Field. It's free to attend. We have some really cool t-shirts that if you come, you'll get one. And as well as just learn about what our programs are and our services. So Leslie, any last comments before we head out?
So thank you all for joining us tonight. And there's definitely plenty of resources in the community. You can try calling 211 and saying help. And all you need is a zip code, and they can give you your nearest resource, depending on what you're asking for, what the need is. I know Esperanza, Paul mentioned it, does parenting circles. It's meant to be sort of like a social therapeutic group. It's a way to relieve some of that stress. Consider family counseling, individual counseling, whatever you got to do to get the stress out so that we don't move in the direction of inappropriate or potentially abusive behaviors, definitely for the sake of our kids, for sure.
I think the biggest takeaway from today in this difficult discussion was just becoming aware, having that education, knowing where the resources are so that you can become well-informed and avoid these crises, that situations, break that barrier so that our children have a future in this crazy world. So thank you all for watching. We look forward to seeing you at our next show and enjoy your night.